Crimson Louboutin heels carved deadly percussion across Italian marble. The 8th floor of Sterling Industries held its breath. Vanessa Sterling emerged from her corner office like a storm, made flesh shoulders squared in charcoal Armani, platinum hair pulled into a war-ready chignon, Arctic blue eyes blazing with executive wrath. The janitor's cart had stopped. The man behind it had lingered one heartbeat too long, his gaze catching the ghostly blue diagnostic codes reflected in her floor-to-ceiling windows. Her voice cut through corporate silence like a blade through silk. "Peek once more and you're fired. What gives you the right to invade my private space?" The hallway crystallized into absolute stillness. But Lucas Hayes didn't shatter under her frost. His weathered hands continued their methodical work, sorting supplies with the precision of someone who understood systems. When he finally turned, his chocolate-brown eyes met her ice-fire stare without wavering. The words that left his lips were quieter than whispers, deadlier than shouts. "I wasn't looking at your office, Ms. Sterling. I was looking at the solution." 20-year veteran security guard Trevor watched his coffee cup tremble in his grip. In 2 decades of corporate warfare, no one had ever rendered Vanessa Sterling speechless. Until tonight. Vanessa's knuckles whitened against the mahogany door frame until bone showed through skin. The diagnostic code 0-X-0-0-0-0-7-E floated like a digital ghost in her peripheral vision, mocking her from the dead screen behind her desk. 3 nights running, her system had crashed precisely at 6:07 p.m., devouring hours of critical work like a ravenous beast. The scent of her expensive perfume mixed with the sharp tang of electronic failure and mounting desperation. But janitors didn't read diagnostic codes. Janitors pushed mops and stayed invisible. They certainly didn't stand their ground when she unleashed Arctic corporate fury. Her voice scraped from her throat like broken glass over concrete. "What did you say to me?" The hallway stretched between them like a battlefield, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on marble that had cost more than most people's annual salaries. Lucas's shoulders remained relaxed beneath his navy uniform shirt, fabric worn soft from industrial washings. No tremor in his stance, no defeated shuffle towards the service elevator. The man radiated calm that came from weathering storms far worse than executive tantrums. "Your server cluster is running a parallel processing error," he said, voice steady as mountain stone. "The blue screen reflection in your window displays diagnostic code 0-X-0-0-0-0-7-E. Critical system failure causing cascade shutdowns. His technical assessment was delivered with surgical precision. I can implement corrective protocols in approximately 10 minutes, or you can continue losing 3 productive hours every evening until deadline pressure destroys whatever you're trying to accomplish." The janitor's cart sat between them like a metal referee, industrial wheels locked in place. Bottles of commercial cleaner caught fluorescent illumination, casting chemical rainbows across polished chrome surfaces. His toolkit hung from the cart's side standard issue: screwdrivers, microfiber cloths, rubber gloves, nothing suggesting computer expertise beyond basic equipment maintenance. Vanessa's breathing hitched, a hairline fracture appearing in her armor of absolute control. The Ice Queen, who'd reduced grown executives to stammering apologies, was staring at a maintenance worker who'd just offered solutions that had stumped her entire IT department for weeks. "You're telling me," she began, voice carrying dangerous quiet that preceded either promotion or termination, "that you understand enterprise-level network architecture." Lucas bent to retrieve a fallen spray bottle, movements economical, and practiced like everything else in his carefully ordered existence. When he straightened, something flickered behind those chocolate-brown eyes, not defiance, not submission, but quiet recognition of crossroads reached and bridges about to be either constructed or incinerated. "I understand systems, Ms. Sterling. Mechanical systems, electrical systems, human systems, computer systems." His voice carried weight that spoke of deliberately unspoken histories, experiences filed in mental archives marked classified. "The fundamental principles remain constant across all applications." He paused, studying her face with unexpected intensity. "The real question isn't whether I can diagnose your technical problems. The question is whether you're desperate enough to accept help from someone you've been trained to ignore." The challenge hung in recycled corporate air, like a gauntlet thrown across medieval ground. Trevor shifted uncomfortably behind his security desk, pen frozen halfway through incident report he wasn't sure how to complete. In 20 years of monitoring Sterling Industries' executive floor, he'd witnessed hostile takeover attempts and boardroom coups, but nothing had prepared him for maintenance worker calmly dissecting CEO authority while discussing server architecture like tenured professor addressing undergraduate students. Vanessa's pupils dilated slightly, predatory focus sharpening on prey that had revealed unexpected fangs. "Who are you?" The question carried weight of corporate investigation budgets and background check thoroughness that could expose secrets buried in digital graveyards. 4:45 a.m. alarm pierced pre-dawn darkness like digital knife through black velvet. Lucas's iPhone 6, held together with electrical tape and stubborn determination, vibrated against particle board that served triple duty as nightstand, desk, and reminder of compromises made for financial survival. He rolled from the mattress on cold linoleum, bare feet finding purchase with practiced silence. 7-year-old daughters needed sleep more than fathers needed comfortable mornings. Chloe's breathing remained deep, and even from the pull-out couch 10 feet away, her small form buried beneath a Pokémon comforter that had survived too many wash cycles. The studio apartment's kitchenette carried aromatic testimony to their circumstances. Yesterday's instant ramen, discount coffee, the metallic scent of worry that seemed to permeate everything. The coffee maker wheezed to life with mechanical reluctance, brewing motivation from beans purchased in economy bulk containers. Bills stacked beside the machine told mathematical stories of inputs and outputs that never quite balanced electric company notices printed on increasingly urgent paper colors, water department warnings, rent reminders marked with red ink that meant business. Lucas filled the dented aluminum pot while his mind remained locked on Arctic blue eyes, and the moment when everything had shifted like tectonic plates, rearranging themselves into new geological configurations. Vanessa Sterling had stared at him for exactly 15 seconds after his technical assessment. 15 seconds of cosmic recalibration that felt like watching stars reorganize into different constellations. Then she'd stepped aside without speaking, granting access to her corporate sanctuary. Steam rose from his coffee cup like incense offerings to caffeine gods while he reviewed the previous evening's work. Her system had been more compromised than initial diagnosis suggested, cascade failures propagating through connected networks like virus spreading through compromised immune system. But the repair had been elegant in its simplicity, addressing root causes rather than symptomatic manifestations that had confused lesser technicians for months. 23 minutes to identify core problems, 17 minutes to implement sustainable solutions, 8 minutes of testing to verify system stability. The kind of efficiency that came from understanding fundamental principles rather than memorizing procedural responses. The kind of competence that raised uncomfortable questions about why MIT-educated aerospace engineer was emptying corporate waste baskets. Chloe stirred as coffee percolated with sounds like caffeinated percussion section. Small hands emerged from Pokémon covers to rub sleep from eyes that mirrored his warm brown, but held her mother's fierce intelligence like hidden treasure waiting for proper appreciation. "Daddy, did you fix more computers last night?" Her voice carried particular gravity that children reserved for questions they sensed were more important than adults wanted to admit. The innocence in her tone made his chest tighten with familiar mixture of pride and protective anxiety. She was too perceptive, too curious about his work that supposedly involved only cleaning supplies and trash removal. "Just helped someone solve a technical problem, sweetheart," he replied, crouching beside her makeshift bed. His fingers found the morning ritual of French braiding, weaving auburn strands with methodical precision he brought to everything else. Amy's hair, Amy's quick smile, Amy's way of approaching problems like miniature engineer dissecting complex systems to understand their fundamental operations. Everything beautiful about Chloe had come from her mother's genetic gift, not his more practical contributions to their shared DNA. "That's what engineers do," he continued, securing the braid with bright yellow Pokémon hair tie that grinned up at them with Pikachu optimism. "Even when they're pretending to be something else temporarily." The admission slipped out before careful filters could prevent it. Chloe's eyes widened with 7-year-old wisdom that sometimes cut deeper than adult criticism. "But you're not an engineer anymore, Daddy," she observed with crushing childhood honesty. "You told me engineers work in offices with big computers and important meetings. You clean offices instead of working in them." The truth landed like physical blow, tiny fist of reality connecting with jaw of rationalization that had grown tender from repeated impact. Lucas's hands stilled in her hair for just a moment, processing innocent cruelty of children who spoke truth because they hadn't learned that adults preferred comfortable lies. "Sometimes we become what we need to be instead of what we trained to be," he said carefully, choosing words like surgical instruments designed for precision rather than force. "But that doesn't mean we stop being who we really are underneath all the uniforms and job descriptions." Breakfast consisted of Champions-level pancakes made from discount mix, orange juice from concentrate, and coffee that tasted like determination rather than Colombian excellence. Chloe attacked her meal with enthusiasm that suggested complete confidence in Daddy's ability to provide, innocence that made his protective instincts flare like emergency signals. She chatted about school projects and playground politics with boundless energy, unaware that their morning routine was choreographed around financial constraints that governed every decision from breakfast choices to heating bills. "Mrs. Rodriguez says I'm ready for advanced mathematics," she announced between bites. "Tommy's dad is teaching him binary code after-school programs." Casual mention of opportunities that required resources they couldn't afford. The drive to Washington Elementary took exactly 12 minutes through Riverside's residential streets, past houses where normal families lived, normal lives funded by employment that didn't require hiding advanced degrees in sock drawers. Lucas navigated morning traffic while Chloe provided running commentary on mathematical concepts that made his chest simultaneously swell with pride and constrict with terror. She was too intellectually gifted for their current circumstances, too curious for limitations his choices had imposed on their shared trajectory toward futures that seemed increasingly constrained by present necessities. Her potential deserved better than survival-mode parenting that prioritized stability over intellectual stimulation, presence over professional advancement, that might provide educational opportunities currently beyond their financial reach. Tommy's dad says binary code is like secret language that computers understand. Chloe continued, backpack bouncing against her small frame as they approached school grounds. I told him my daddy probably knows computer languages better than his daddy knows regular English, because you fix technical problems and stuff like that. Her casual confidence in his capabilities felt simultaneously like blessing and curse faith that demanded living up to expectations while maintaining protective deception about why aerospace engineer was working janitorial shifts. His dad's an accountant who mostly deals with money numbers, but you understand how machines think and solve problems they can't fix themselves. The hero worship in her voice made guilt twist in his stomach like physical pain. Lucas felt familiar weight of hidden identity pressing down like atmospheric pressure before thunderstorms. Mathematics is mathematics, sweetheart, he replied, pulling into elementary school's drop-off lane behind minivans driven by soccer moms whose biggest career challenge was coordinating carpool schedules. Doesn't matter who teaches it as long as you learn principles well enough to build whatever you want to build someday. Educational platitudes that masked deeper truth. Her mathematical aptitude was an inherited gift that deserved nurturing he couldn't currently provide without compromising family stability that had taken 2 years to achieve. The school bell tower chimed 8 o'clock with mechanical precision, calling children to opportunities their parents had sacrificed to make possible. Sterling Industries gleamed in morning sunlight like glass and steel monument to successful capitalism. 40-story tower reaching toward clouds that promised afternoon precipitation. Lucas badged through service entrance, exchanging familiar nods with overnight cleaning crew heading home to families, and sleep that came at reasonable hours. Day shift janitors moved with quiet efficiency, born from understanding that invisibility was simultaneously burden and protection management, noticed you when something malfunctioned, ignored you when everything operated smoothly. 18 months of perfecting smooth function over management attention had taught him institutional navigation skills that complemented rather than replaced technical expertise, gathering dust in mental storage facilities marked former life. The service elevator carried him upward, through floors that smelled progressively more expensive industrial cleaning products, giving way to imported leather and French roast coffee that cost more per pound than most families spent on weekly groceries. Executive territory operated by different rules, governed by mathematics measured in millions rather than missed meals, populated by people whose problems required solutions that couldn't be purchased at discount stores or resolved through determination alone. His cartwheels whispered across Italian marble that cost more per square foot than minimum wage workers earned monthly, polished stone reflecting overhead lighting like frozen water that had been shaped by artisans rather than nature. Vanessa Sterling's corner office sat empty in morning silence, blinds drawn against sunlight that might interfere with computer screens displaying numbers determining whether 47 employees continued receiving paychecks that supported mortgages and medical insurance and children's educational expenses throughout Riverside community. Evidence of her presence lingered like expensive perfume molecules suspended in recycled air charcoal blazer draped across executive chair with casual precision, half-finished coffee growing cold beside reports marked urgent in red ink, suggesting institutional bleeding, requiring immediate tourniquet application. She'd been there recently working through dawn hours, would return soon carrying burden of decisions that affected families she'd never met, but whose welfare depended on her competence and determination and ability to solve problems that kept multiplying faster than solutions could be implemented. The computer monitor sat dark and accusatory, no longer displaying diagnostic codes that had triggered everything, but Lucas could still see reflection of systematic failure in black screen that mirrored his own complicated relationship with visible competence versus comfortable anonymity that protected both him and Chloe from expectations and obligations that might not be compatible with single-parenthood requirements. Last night's technical intervention had been more comprehensive than anyone realized, not just fixing immediate problems, but implementing preventive protocols that would forestall similar failures for months if properly maintained. The kind of systematic thinking that separated engineering education from technical training, long-term solutions from short-term patches that created dependencies rather than independence from external support systems. Morning passed in carefully choreographed avoidance as Lucas worked assigned floors with methodical precision while tracking executive movement through peripheral vision trained by 18 months of institutional observation. He emptied wastebaskets filled with discarded ambitions and failed strategies, restocked supply closets holding tools of other people's productivity, maintained polished veneer that kept corporate machinery humming with mechanical contentment that disguised underlying tensions threatening organizational stability. But awareness remained tuned to eighth-floor dynamics, cataloging rhythm of power in motion like seismograph detecting earthquake tremors before major disruption reshapes familiar landscape into unrecognizable terrain requiring new navigation strategies and survival techniques. 10:30 a.m. brought Vanessa's emergence from conference room like general exiting war council, flanked by assistants whose expressions screamed crisis management protocols activated for damage control that might already be too late for effective intervention. Her platinum hair caught fluorescent illumination as she moved with measured steps calculated for maximum executive impact, despite tension radiating from her frame like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. She didn't acknowledge maintenance crew, didn't glance toward man who'd performed technical miracles while she watched in arctic silence. But her fingers drummed against expensive leather portfolio in Morse code patterns, spelling mounting anxiety in language Lucas recognized from 2 years studying corporate body language that revealed more than official communications ever admitted. The company was hemorrhaging something: vital confidence, reputation, financial resources, institutional morale, and Vanessa Sterling was rapidly exhausting executive magic tricks designed to stop bleeding that threatened transformation of success story into cautionary tale about overextended growth and inadequate infrastructure investment. Her movements carried desperation disguised as determination, authority masking fear that competence might not be sufficient for challenges requiring expertise she didn't possess and couldn't purchase through conventional consulting arrangements that provided analysis rather than effective solutions. Lucas finished restocking supply closet and confronted decision that would either preserve carefully constructed invisibility or shatter it completely in favor of professional resurrection, carrying risks he hadn't been willing to consider since Amy's death, had redefined everything about priority structures and acceptable danger levels. The elevator climbed toward executive floors with mechanical precision, while Lucas studied reflection in polished steel doors revealing Navy uniform shirt, company identification badge, carefully maintained facade of someone belonging in service corridors rather than boardrooms where million-dollar decisions were made by people whose educational credentials matched his own hidden qualifications. But facades were engineering problems like everything else, and every problem had solutions for those brave enough to implement them, regardless of personal cost or professional consequences, that couldn't be calculated until after commitment had been made, and bridges had been either constructed or incinerated, depending on execution quality and stakeholder response to unexpected competence demonstrations. 8th floor buzzed with electromagnetic tension, accompanying corporate emergencies, assistants moving with sharp efficiency while conducting phone conversations in urgent whispers, suggesting damage control efforts, failing to contain whatever crisis had triggered institutional panic protocols. Vanessa's office door stood partially open like invitation to disaster, revealing glimpses of platinum hair bent over reports apparently containing nothing but bad news written in red ink that might as well have been corporate blood loss statistics. Lucas knocked twice against mahogany door frame, sound somehow managing to be both deferential and confident, requesting attention without demanding it through respectful acknowledgement of hierarchy, while asserting competence that transcended job descriptions and uniform colors. "Miss Sterling, may I have a few minutes of your time?" The question carried professional courtesy wrapped around personal necessity, acknowledging institutional power structures while suggesting value proposition that might justify interruption of executive schedule packed with crisis management activities. Vanessa's head snapped up with predatory swiftness that suggested corporate hunter recognizing potential prey or possible salvation instincts couldn't distinguish between threat and opportunity until additional information clarified intentions and capabilities. For exactly 3 heartbeats, neither spoke, while atmospheric pressure shifted between them like weather systems colliding over disputed territory. Then she gestured toward leather chair across from her desk, mahogany and imported comfort that probably cost more than Lucas earned in 6 months of emptying other people's discarded ambitions and failed strategies. "Close the door behind you," she commanded, voice carrying authority that had built Sterling Industries from entrepreneurial concept into successful operation supporting dozens of families throughout local community. The office space wrapped around them like expensive cocoon designed to insulate executive decision-making from external pressures that might interfere with strategic thinking, requiring focus and concentration and freedom from distractions that could prove costly when measured in employee welfare and institutional survival. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Riverside's modest skyline, artwork whispered rather than shouted cultural significance, understated luxury that came from confidence that didn't need proving anything to anyone because success spoke louder than decorative choices or status symbol displays. Tension crackled between polished surfaces like electricity, seeking ground through atmospheric discharge that could illuminate understanding or incinerate relationships, depending on how carefully power was channeled through appropriate conductors rather than explosive short circuits that destroyed rather than connected different energy systems. Vanessa leaned back in executive chair with gesture that might have seemed relaxed, if not for white-knuckled grip she maintained on Mont Blanc pen, like weapon ready for deployment against threats that couldn't be eliminated through conventional corporate warfare tactics, requiring different strategies and unexpected alliances. "Last night you fixed my computer system in exactly 8 minutes and 14 seconds, she began, voice carrying deadly calm that preceded either corporate executions or strategic partnerships, depending on subsequent conversation quality and mutual benefit recognition. This morning I discovered that our entire network infrastructure has been failing in ways that should theoretically be impossible according to every consultant we've hired over the past 6 months. Her ice-blue eyes studied his face like forensic investigator searching for micro-expressions that might reveal valuable intelligence about motivations and capabilities remaining strategically concealed. Our information technology department has no solutions. Our consulting firm wants 6 figures and 3 months to diagnose what you identified in a casual hallway observation. Lucas settled into Italian leather that yielded beneath his weight with expensive comfort, designed to make visitors feel either pampered or intimidated, depending on psychological relationship with institutional power and authority structures that governed corporate interactions. Parallel processing errors create cascade failures through connected systems when load balancing protocols haven't been properly configured for current usage patterns. He replied, technical explanation wrapped in same matter-of-fact tone he used discussing lunch menu options with Chloe. Fix source code corruption, implement proper resource allocation algorithms, establish redundancy pathways for critical operations, and entire network stabilizes within 4 to 6 hours depending on system complexity and hardware specifications. Assessment delivered with casual confidence, suggesting someone who'd diagnosed and resolved similar problems countless times before. Vanessa's pen stopped rhythmic tapping against mahogany, sudden silence feeling louder than corporate noise usually filling executive spaces with constant reminders of productivity and urgency and pressure that never completely subsided even during supposedly peaceful moments. Oh, 4 to 6 hours. She repeated, voice flat with skeptical disbelief earned through months of expensive consultation, producing analysis rather than effective solutions to problems threatening institutional survival and employee welfare. Our best people estimate 4 weeks minimum for proper diagnosis, assuming they can identify root causes they haven't managed to locate in 3 months of intensive investigation. Her expression suggested corporate predator recognizing worthy opponent across negotiation table, where stakes were measured in millions of dollars and dozens of families depending on successful resolution. Lucas met her ice-blue stare without flinching, chocolate brown eyes steady against Arctic interrogation that had reduced seasoned executives to stammering apologies and hasty resignations from positions they'd spent years achieving through competence and political navigation that couldn't withstand sustained pressure from someone who'd built successful company, through determination and strategic thinking that separated winners from casualties in competitive marketplace. Your people are treating symptoms instead of diagnosing underlying pathology, he said with patient tone of teacher explaining fundamental principles to advanced students who'd somehow missed basic concepts during educational foundation building. It's like prescribing pain medication for compound fractures might reduce immediate discomfort, but won't heal broken bones causing real problems that require surgical intervention rather than symptomatic management. Something flickered across Vanessa's expression, too quick to catalogue, but significant enough to shift atmospheric pressure between them like barometric changes preceding weather system transformation from stable conditions to potentially destructive disturbances requiring protective measures and strategic preparation for scenarios that might demand rapid adaptation to changed circumstances. She reached for manila folder marked confidential in red letters, screaming institutional secrecy and competitive intelligence that could affect stock prices and employment stability throughout organization if mishandled by personnel lacking appropriate security clearance and trustworthiness verification. Her fingers hesitated over classified information before corporate desperation overcame executive caution that normally governed disclosure decisions. Sterling Industries has exactly 72 hours to demonstrate system stability and network reliability that will satisfy Hartwell Corporation's technical requirements, she said, each word carefully measured like expensive medicine, dispensed in precise doses that could either heal or poison depending on recipients' ability to process information appropriately. $12 million annually, 40% of our total revenue stream. The difference between continued operation and bankruptcy proceedings that would affect 47 families depending on this company for mortgage payments, medical insurance, children's educational opportunities, and basic survival needs throughout Riverside community that has limited alternative employment options for people with specialized skills. The admission cost her something vital, carefully maintained separation between executive decision-making and employee awareness that preserved hierarchy through information control and strategic communication limiting knowledge to need-to-know basis that protected both institutional security and individual emotional welfare by preventing panic that could undermine performance when clear thinking was most essential. Lucas absorbed financial mathematics without visible reaction, while mind already passed technical solutions against timeline constraints and calculated risk factors extending beyond immediate crisis management into long-term sustainability issues that would determine whether quick fixes held up under operational pressure or failed spectacularly when stakeholder attention moved to other priorities and maintenance budgets returned to previous inadequate levels. Show me your complete network architecture documentation, he requested, words wrapped in quiet authority that belonged in boardrooms rather than janitorial supply closets where he'd been storing technical expertise for 2 years. I'll need administrative access to all servers, diagnostic software, system modification protocols, and configuration files that haven't been updated since initial installation. Technical requirements delivered with professional confidence, assuming cooperation rather than requesting permission. Engineering expertise, asserting dominance over corporate hierarchy through demonstrated competence rather than institutional position, earned through political navigation rather than technical qualification. Vanessa's manicured hand moved toward computer monitor, then stopped as another question occurred to her, one that could determine whether she was about to save her company or destroy it through misplaced trust. Before I give you access to classified systems that could destroy Sterling Industries if mishandled by someone with malicious intent, she said, voice carrying weight of corporate investigation budgets and background check thoroughness that could expose secrets buried in digital graveyards and financial records and personal histories that people preferred to keep confidential. I need to know exactly who you really are, Mr. Hayes. Not just your name and employment record, but who you were before you started emptying my waste baskets and why someone with your obvious technical competence is working maintenance shifts instead of earning executive salary commensurate with your capabilities. The question hung in recycled corporate air like sword balanced on its point, sharp edge gleaming with potential for either salvation or destruction depending on how carefully truth was handled by people whose interests might not align as perfectly as current crisis suggested through temporary alliance based on mutual necessity rather than long-term compatibility and shared values that could sustain partnership through normal operational pressures rather than just emergency situations requiring heroic individual efforts. Lucas felt familiar weights pressing down on shoulders that had carried burden of hidden identity for 2 years. Mortgage payment Amy never lived to see. Chloe's college fund existing only in hopeful imagination. Carefully constructed life built on foundation of deliberate limitation and strategic invisibility that protected both father and daughter from expectations and obligations that might not be compatible with single parenthood, requiring presence over prestige and stability over intellectual satisfaction. Truth carried consequences that rippled outward like stones thrown into still water, creating waves that reached shores nobody could predict until impact analysis was completed and damage assessment finished through careful observation of results rather than theoretical modeling that might not account for human variables and emotional responses that couldn't be calculated through mathematical formulas or engineering equations that worked perfectly for mechanical systems, but failed when applied to complicated interpersonal dynamics involving trust and vulnerability and mutual dependence on people whose motivations might change when circumstances shifted and pressure increased beyond comfortable tolerance levels.